Anthony Crimmon's StickStar component-based instructional methodology, pulling the ball against the mesh. Pulling the ball against the mesh is a foundational skill, especially when discussing feel. You have to learn how to feel the ball against the mesh as you pull it. This is Pillar 5. So when discussing pulling the ball against the mesh, we will talk about the big motion. Controlling the ball with your hands. Pulling it to the mesh. Turning the stick with your bottom hand specifically. The different variations, flipping, taking to one hand, and then how you can also do this off the ground. The first thing we'll start with is the big motion. So just like any of the feel exercises we do, this is going to be difficult to begin, but we just have to work through that. When we discuss the big motion, what we're thinking about doing is turning the stick up and then pulling the ball back down to the mesh. We turn the stick up, our hands turn over, and then we pull the ball against the mesh. A lot of times what will happen with beginners is you'll bring the stick up, you'll turn it, and then the ball will fall out. Ultimately, once we get to the top, we're trying to turn the stick and pull it to the mesh. To begin, we have our feet squared, we have our grips with the stick staying outside of the palm, and we're just gonna be here, hands out in front, near to, stick works up, we turn the stick, pull it to the mesh. Pull it to the mesh. You'll feel the ball just floating, suspended, right? We need to get in control of it and turn it. Feel the ball against the mesh while you're turning your hands. This is the big motion that we're starting to work on. So, when we're pulling the ball against the mesh, we really want to focus on this bottom hand. As the stick works up, our thumb should be on the back edge, and we're really turning the stick with that bottom hand. This will ultimately help us with our bottom hand cradle eventually. So, stick is going up, I pull it to the mesh with the bottom hand. Pull it to the mesh. We really want to make sure that we explore the edges and the full range of this motion. So as the ball is going up, I can take it back down, pulling it to the mesh with the bottom hand, really focusing on the fact that it's not in the palm of my hand. Because a lot of people will have their hand so stuck to it that they're turning their whole hand when they try to do this. You want to keep the stick in the pads of your hands and out, right? Really pulling with this bottom hand. Pulling back down against the mesh. That's the bottom hand. So now we want to kind of explore the different variations that we can use. One is the big motion, right? Here. Letting our hands go up and then turning the ball. Then we can start to tighten it up, right? We can also do this low, right? So that if you pick up a ground ball, you can keep the ball underneath your knees, right? Lower to the ground. Now, we can start to flip to ourselves and then bottom hand. Flip, and then do the motion. Flip, do the motion. Flip, let it hit the ground, do the motion. Flip, let it hit the ground, do the motion. All the while, we're trying to pull the ball against the mesh so that we have feel for the ball. Now, more extreme variations, right? At some point, you want to be able to pull the ball back, right? If I'm on a ground ball, I can pick it up and then bring it in and then out. A man is working towards the ball is on the ground. Pick it up, in and then out. So it's pulling the ball back as if you were pulling rope, right? So then it's let it hit the ground, bottom hand, out. This feel exercise builds the bottom hand pickup. These are just some of the variations you can do. So to recap, that's pulling the ball against the mesh. We talked about the big motion, right? Finding the extremes, the range, the edges. Then we tightened it up. We want to focus on turning the stick in our hands. We want to focus on our bottom hand, really pulling the ball against the mesh. Lastly, we have the different variations, which we'll explore in greater detail in other videos. Next up, we'll talk about ground ball mechanics in Pillar 6.